Okay, the House Environmental Resource and Energy Committee the House Environmental Committee will now come to order. Evan, would you take the roll?
Vitale.
Here.
Brown.
I believe he's on his way.
Fleming. Here. Hohenstein.
Here.
Isaacson.
He's expected to be here.
Kazim.
Leave.
Atten.
Not sure.
Pielli.
Here.
Rivera.
Here.
Salisbury.
Remote.
Here.
Siegel.
Leave.
Steele.
Remote.
Here.
Takak.
Not sure.
Webster.
Leave.
Rader.
Here.
Bashline.
Leave.
Day.
Here.
Flick.
Leave.
James.
Here.
Kephart.
Leave.
Mahaffey.
Yeah, online? Okay, he's online.
Mahaffey.
Here.
Pugh.
Here.
Schaefer.
Leave.
Stender.
Here.
Twardzik.
Here.
Wentling.
Leave.
And Rep. Frielaten and Rep. Isaacson are both here. Okay, Nikki, will you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. How are you?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay. This is a meeting of the House Environmental Committee. It is a public hearing on the subject of how should Pennsylvania subsidize the remediation of waste coal piles. There are over 1,000 waste coal piles in Pennsylvania, and it's estimated that there are over 200 million tons of waste coal in these piles. There are approximately 10 waste coal power plants that burn waste coal. There are undeniable environmental benefits to the burning of waste coal, including the remediation of sites, the elimination of water contamination, which occurs when water runs through these sites into our streams, and the elimination of waste coal piles, which would release CO2 into the air. Yet at the same time, there are environmental costs to the burning of waste coal to produce electricity. There are substantial CO2 emissions. It is estimated that the burning of waste coal produces twice the amount of greenhouse gas than the burning of conventional coal. There is also the issue of conventional air pollution, such as NOx and particulate matter. It's been described as the burning of waste coal has been described by some as the transfer of land pollution to air pollution. Waste coal burners, those who burn waste coal for electricity, receive significant compensation from the state. One source of compensation is compensation through the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standards Act, as it is considered a Tier 2 resource. The closing of the borders requiring this resource to come from within the borders of Pennsylvania in 2020 dramatically increased the costs, and that means the cost to ratepayers of waste coal power. Coal producers, those who burn waste coal to produce electricity, also receive what's known as a coal refuge energy compensation tax at a rate of $8 per ton tax credit. This was doubled in 2024. Waste coal providers also receive capacity payments for being available to provide capacity electricity when the grid requires it. Some would say that waste coal producers are significantly overcompensated for the waste coal power they generate. House Bill 501, which this bill passed out earlier this year, would propose moving waste coal to a Tier 3, substantially changing and reducing the compensation waste coal providers would receive. There are alternatives to the burning of waste coal, including relocating certain waste coal to landfills, capping certain waste coal piles in place, and a combination of the two. Today we are going to discuss the issue of how should waste coal piles be subsidized in their remediation. We have 6 speakers today. We have Nate Holtz from the Department of Environmental Protection. Nate is the Deputy Secretary in the Office of Active and Abandoned Mine Operation. We have Rob Altenberg, Director, Energy and Climate, Penn Future. We have Robert Ruth, the Policy Director, Pennsylvania Climate and Energy from the National Resource Defense Council. We have Jared Givens, Executive Director, Appalachian Region Independent Power Producers Association. We have Tom Schuster, Director, Clean Energy Program Sierra Club. And finally, Charlie McFedrin, Senior Attorney for Earth Justice. Our format will be as usual. Each speaker will be permitted up to 8 minutes to make his presentation, and each speaker unit will be a total of 15 minutes. So if the speaker is speaking alone, he would have 8 minutes, and then the balance of his 15 minutes would be for question and answer from the legislators. When you group the panels, as we will be doing with several of the panels, that time period will just be doubled. I will be strict about the times and will warn members when you are getting within a minute or so of your time limit. Before we begin, Chairman Rader, do you have any thoughts, any opening remarks?
No opening thoughts yet. I'll have questions as we proceed. Thank you.
Okay, then. We will start with our first speaker, Nate Holtz of the Department of Environmental Protection. Nate, am I getting your name right? Nathan Holtz. How? I apologize. Okay. Oh,
Good morning, Chair
morning.
Vitale, Chair Rader, and members of the House Environmental and Natural Resources Protection Committee. My name is Nathan Holtz, and I am the Deputy Secretary for Active and Abandoned Mine Operations with the Department of Environmental Protection. And I'm here to provide testimony on waste coal, or as we refer to it, coal refuse, and the different ways to remediate coal refuse piles in Pennsylvania. Coal refuse is generally low BTU waste coal, rock, slurry, and related materials which are separated from coal during the mining, cleaning, and coal preparation process. While traditional coal is used in a number of ways, including power generation, metallurgical uses, and residential heating, coal refuse is a reject material and its usefulness is limited. According to the Bureau of Abandoned Mine Reclamation, BAMR, Abandoned Mine Land Inventory, there are approximately 1,036 pre-act unreclaimed refuse piles in Pennsylvania, covering approximately 9,400 acres. Pre-act refers to those abandoned mine land features that existed prior to the adoption of 1977 Federal Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act, SMACRA, regulations, and are therefore the responsibility of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to reclaim. The majority of the unreclaimed AML features in Pennsylvania are on private property and are not owned by the Commonwealth. With a property owner's consent and federal approval from the Office of Surface Mining, Reclamation, and Enforcement, AML federal funding is utilized to reclaim these features. BAMR utilizes a prioritization scale for reclamation based on protection of public health and safety. The scale ranges from highest priority, priority 1, down to the lowest priority, priority 3. Now, 78% of the refuse piles in Pennsylvania fall in the lowest priority, P3 category. In order to achieve reclamation of pre-act coal refuse piles with federal funding, BAMR typically utilizes one of 4 reclamation strategies through construction contracts with private industry. These strategies include remove the refuse pile and transport it to a fluidized bed combustion, FBC, power plant to be burned, or blend the refuse pile with alkaline material and use it to backfill an abandoned surface mining pit. Remove the coal refuse pile and transport it to a permitted coal refuse disposal facility, or cover and cap the refuse pile with best available capping material and establish vegetation on the reclaimed slopes to reclaim the AML site. For sites permitted after implementation of 1977 federal SMACRA through a coal refuse reprocessing permit, the reclamation options are limited. These sites are not eligible for the BAMR AML reclamation program, and the only way to reclaim these coal refuse piles is through removal of the pile under the coal refuse reprocessing permit. Hauling the coal refuse to an FBC power plant to be burned eliminates both an unsightly pile from the landscape and a possible source of acid mine drainage to waters of the Commonwealth. There are 86 active refuse reprocessing permits in the Commonwealth. Since 1988, when the department started tracking annual production of coal refuse reprocessing, more than 208 million tons of coal refuse has been mined in the Commonwealth, eliminating a number of coal refuse piles. For that time period, that is an average of 5.6 million tons of coal refuse mined per year. Currently, 11 FBC power plants remain in operation, which are being supplied with fuel from active coal refuse reprocessing permits across the Commonwealth. Mining of coal refuse not only eliminates these AML coal refuse piles, but many of the remaining FBC power plants in the anthracite region are located near abandoned surface mining pits that have limited backfill material available for reclamation. FBC power plants generate coal ash, which is used to backfill and reclaim these abandoned pits. The elimination of these abandoned pits restores positive drainage, fills dangerous pits, and restores the site to a usable status. Since 2009, over 110 million tons of coal ash has been beneficially used in mine reclamation throughout Pennsylvania. Thank you for your invitation and for the opportunity to provide testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Joe?
Yeah, thank you, Secretary. I appreciate you coming and love the fact that we've got an acronym like SMACRA. That's fantastic. One of the things that I'd like to know from your perspective, because we're going to hear it, I think, from folks who have very divergent perspectives, is the viability of the repurposing for electricity. I really appreciate that the recovery or the remediation measures for waste coal are removing an environmental hazard, but I do have some concerns, as the chairman said, that we're just changing the place where the pollution happens. And I'd like to hear from your perspective as the agency, even though it's not technically within what you would be examining or reviewing, what is that viability for the use of energy, and is that a trade-off that's valuable to make, or it's a trade-off that's too expensive for us to make?
Yes, so you know, I oversee the mining and the reclamation only, so I could take that question back to, you know, others at DEP and get you an answer, but I don't have an answer for that from myself.
Okay, Chair Rader.
I have a question.
I'm sure there are a lot of regulations dealing with the industry, and there are a lot of good-paying jobs, as we can see, that go along with the power plants in use. Are there any issues with the power plants that are running right now? Are they running according to what your plans are? Or are they in violation of multiple regulations as they operate?
So sorry to give the same answer, but
Same
I don't
answer.
regulate the power plants. I only regulate the mining and the reclamation.
Well, I just haven't heard of any issues that we've had with the power plants. And I know from what I see in my electric bills at home and the people that pay their electrical prices, if we start limiting supply, it's going to impact, and this is just me going off on something, it's going to impact the cost of electricity no matter what other issues are out there. I know if you have less supply, you're going to have higher prices for it. So I'm a little concerned that if the industry is running according to how DEP wants it being run, why we would try and do something about that and maybe limit the supply of electricity that we all need. And it seems like in Pennsylvania we're going to need more and more of it. So I was just wondering if DEP any issues with how it's operating now. And then you'd have the same answer for the coal refuse, I assume, with a similar question. What's the most effective way if we see a positive in getting electricity from the coal refuse? Why would we do something else? Because we generally need so much more electricity than we're even producing now, and we're not going to get it from wind and solar to replace that. So, but you don't have the answer, so I just went on with my question, and thank you for considering it.
Thank you. Rep. Brown?
Yes, good morning. So you mentioned another option, which is capping. Can you explain what that would look like?
Yeah, so BAMR uses, like I mentioned, the four different ways to reclaim a site. So for really large refuse piles, I mean, we have some out there that are mountains where there might be, different piles associated, millions of tons on site. The best way to handle a large project like that, if you don't have a power plant to take this to, would be try and slope down the sides, you have to bring material in from off-site, like clay to cap, and, to put a cap over an entire site like that.
Yeah, who would pay for that?
The
capping?
projects that we've done through BAMR, it's done through federal dollars. So they did one good example would be the Sheridan coal banks up near Tower City in Schuylkill County. Now, that they weren't able to cap the entire pile, but that was an erosion issue. So the refuse pile was eroding through town. These sites are unstable. They easily erode. So they brought clay material in from off-site, constructed some sediment ponds, some ditches, and capped the outslopes of the pile. That was very expensive to do.
Okay. One more question. So the communities that these piles are in, after a pile is removed, are they in a better position once it's gone or while it's currently there?
Yeah, these piles are generally unsightly, so to have the pile removed is a benefit to the community because you don't have the, you don't have that black pile outside your window anymore. But yeah, they're environmental. Like I said, they're unstable. Water falls on these piles and creates acid mine drainage, both in our streams and into our groundwater. So yeah, they're definitely a benefit to the community to remove the pile.
So last question. If we cap them or don't remove them, how many union jobs are we losing?
I don't know the answer to that.
Do anyone know the answer to that? Thousands?
Oh, well, okay. The format we follow the presenter is the person who answers the question.
Okay.
So if BAMR did a capping job on a refuse pile, so that's a contract job. So they would put that out to bid. A contractor would bid on the job. So there would be haul trucks and things associated with the reclamation project. That would all be done by a contractor paid through BAMR. But I couldn't give a comparison on how many union jobs would be associated with that versus a mining project.
Thank you.
Okay, just wanted to mention one more procedural thing that I forgot. Each segment goes 15 minutes, which I mentioned. If there are unanswered questions, the person with the unanswered question will have first priority next round. So we have about 4 minutes left in this segment, and we have two questions. Mahaffey first, and then if we have chance, we'll get to Rep. Otten.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll pass and wait. Thank you.
Rep. Otten?
Thank you, Chairman. This hearing is in relation to the press legislation, which would be the Pennsylvania Renewable Energy and Sustainability Standard. And one of the challenges with the waste coal portion of the bill or of the current structure is that waste coal is dominating the second tier to the extent that it is driving the cost of the program through the roof. So my question is, we've talked a lot about in discussion of the legislation, chutes and ladders, like we need to give people on-ramps and off-ramps, and how does that work? Do we have a sense of the time, like how much waste coal we have in Pennsylvania and what the timeline is for those piles? Obviously, they're not endless, right? So like how much time and how do we create off-ramps for when those piles are diminished and gone? Do we have a sense of that, or is that something that's still an unknown?
It's, I can say this, with all the AML features that we have in Pennsylvania, till we get through all the IIJA money that we have coming in from the federal government, we're still not going to reclaim all of the AML features that we have. The refuse piles are only, one type of our AML feature, but like I mentioned, they're priority 3. They're a low priority. So some of the funding sources we have that BAMR uses, like fee-based money, we get fee-based money from the federal government. So for every ton of coal that's mined, there's a certain fee from that gets paid into a federal fund and gets handed down to BAMR. And we do a lot of contracts through fee-based, but we're not allowed to do priority 3 unless we lump that in with a higher priority AML feature. So that doesn't take care of the refuse piles, and then we get into the IIJA money. So a project on like a priority 1 or priority 2 AML feature is probably going to score higher in a grant round than just, reclaiming an AML refuse pile. So, there's a lot of refuse piles. I think we said 1,036 estimated in Pennsylvania. As Chair Vitale said, over 200 million tons of refuse in these piles. So, yeah, it's a lot of. It would be hard for me to say projected, time frame of when we'll have that completed.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, 2 minutes. Chair Rader.
I just have a follow-up. From your testimony, it sounds like it's much more cost-effective to have a power plant next to a refuse pile and be cleaning up that way than have DEP actually go out to some site not near a power plant and try and take care of the issue.
Yes, that would be true. In my written testimony, we give a breakdown of, the costs for projects that have been done. And, these FBC power plants, when they came online in the 1980s, they were all sited near a fuel source. The lifetime of those power plants was estimated at 25 years. Well, we're well beyond that. So a lot of those fuel sources have been eliminated, so now you have to go out farther and farther to look for fuel. A good example, if anyone ever drove up Interstate 81 in the 80s and 90s at the Tower City exit where I grew up, there was the Westwood power plant, which was, the refuse pile. There was a mountain. You could see that for miles, and that refuse pile is not
But the
gone.
industry's doing that. You're not paying for that.
The industry's doing that, yeah. The power plant was sited right next to that pile. But with that pile gone, a power plant like Westwood has to look for a fuel source, so you get trucking costs farther and farther away to bring in fuel. Yeah, they do. They do.
Okay, thank you. That concludes this segment. I note that Rep. Stender had an unanswered question, and he will be given priority in the next grouping of people, should he choose to ask a question then. Thank you, Nate. I appreciate it, and sorry about messing up your name. I mess up everybody's name, so don't take it personally.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your great work. Okay, our next panel, we will have Rob Altenberg, Director, Energy and Climate, Penn Future, and Robert Ruth, Policy Director, Pennsylvania Climate and Energy, National Resource Defense Council, and I assume, there's Robert, okay. And thank both of you for coming, and whoever wants to go first, feel free.
Chair Vitale, Chair Rader, members of the committee. My name is Rob Altenberg. I'm the Senior Director for Energy and Climate at Penn Future. And what I'm going to focus on today is just to paint a picture of what the magnitude of the subsidies we are paying, where they're coming from, and some of the impacts of the subsidies. Now, we hear in a lot of committees that the legislature doesn't pick winners and losers. They don't, like to let the market work. But this is a situation where the legislature has, over the years, picked one solution and says this is the solution that's going to be subsidized to the exclusion of all others. The costs are rising, and the costs are mostly falling on Pennsylvanians' electric bills. By way of example, in 2021, the owner of the Scrubgrass and Panther Creek power plants filed an S-1 with the Securities and Exchange Commission where they detailed the net cost of their power. They reported the base cost of the power was about $37 a megawatt hour, and it was reduced to $17 a megawatt hour of incentives. In other words, 70% of their generation costs were being paid through our taxes and electric bills. This was in 2021, and the subsidies have exploded since then. And indications are that the combustion of waste coal is only getting more expensive. And these subsidies, they broke down into a number of different categories. We heard the alternative energy portfolio standards mentioned. Waste coal is part of Tier 2 of the alternative energy portfolio standards, and 10% of our generation has to come from that tier. In 2019, the weighted average Tier 2 credit price, so the price for 1 megawatt hour of generation from Tier 2, was 31 cents. The waste coal generators at that time got about $1.7 million in subsidies out of that program. In late 2020, AEPS was amended to close the borders to restrict Tier 2 to in-state credits. And Tier 2 credits jumped 18-fold up to a little over almost $6 a credit. That jumped the subsidy for the waste coal generators to $41 million. Those incentives have increased even more. By 2024, in the last AEPS report, the Tier 2 credit prices soared to $26.47, a weighted average, with more money spent on Tier 2 credits than on Tier 1 credits or solar credits. Waste coal represented 56% of the Tier 2 credits used in 2024, and facilities received about $198 million. And this isn't just a matter of inflation. So average electric prices had an inflation rate of about 30% over that period. The subsidy cost to waste coal through AEPS increased at a rate 273 times higher than inflation. So subsidies, again, are exploding. We see the same with the coal refuse and reclamation tax credit. When this was originated in 2016, it was $4 a credit, $4 a ton, up to a $10 million cap. That cap was raised to $20 million at the end of 2019, and last year it was doubled to an $8 per ton credit and up to a $55 million cap with a maximum of $14 million at any one facility. Now, to qualify for that, a facility only has to ensure that 75% of the BTUs generated come from waste coal. And this allows facilities like Panther Creek in Carbon County to burn refuse like tires and still qualify for the waste coal tax credit. There's no provision, and we heard from the DEP that there are different priorities, certainly of coal piles. There is no provision in the tax credit or in AEPS to prioritize the removal of the more significant or the highest risk coal piles. Now, these generators are also receiving a lot of money from the capacity payments through PJM. Under this program, generators receive guaranteed payments for the promise to be available in future years. But right now, we have a backlog of new generation entering our PJM queue. So we're sending this increasing price signal for new generation to join, but because of the backlog in the queue, new generation can't join. Prices are exploding. This is probably one of the most significant impacts on electric bills for ratepayers this year. Now, in 2021, the facility the size of Scrubgrass received more than $4.8 million in capacity payments. They could receive that much. Today, they would get about $9.3 million. And next year, that'll increase to $11.3 million. Now, waste coal facilities in total could receive about $135 million in capacity payments, but they're a very minor contributor to actual generation. They represent less than 0.5% of the total generation in PJM states, and they're relatively small facilities, and lately they've been only generating at about half of their design capacity on average. So despite the not picking winners and losers, again, the legislature has effectively decided that burning waste coal is the only acceptable solution. With 388 million subsidies being paid to a handful of waste coal plants, we are already seeing increases in electric bills and tax payments be diverted from other priorities. And there's no sign this situation is going to get any better. On the contrary, there's indications are the efficiency of the plants have been declining. Now, this is likely a combination of resorting to even lower quality coal as the higher quality coal piles are being used, and degrading infrastructure. As we heard, these plants have already, in some cases, doubled their expected lifespan. It's past time we took a hard look at the alternatives. For example, we could adopt a revenue-neutral, market-based solution where we directly appropriated that same $250 million that we're paying right now between APS and the waste coal tax credit, and make it available to whoever can most effectively and most efficiently remediate the waste coal piles. Doing that would encourage innovative solutions that target the waste coal piles that represent the highest risk while keeping the spending under control. The Commonwealth has a fiduciary duty to conserve and maintain public natural resources for the benefit of all the people. In keeping with that duty, it's just time we take a hard look at the spending in waste coal and ask if it is justified. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next, we will go to Robert Ruth. Robert, thank you for coming today, and fire when ready.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again, Chair Vitale, Chair Rader, and honorable members of this committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today about a specific longstanding challenge facing Pennsylvanians.
Okay.
As you've heard, how to cost effectively and responsibly address legacy pollution from coal refuse piles. And given rising electricity prices across the region, we should evaluate the current use of taxpayer and ratepayer subsidies to incentivize burning these piles for energy production. So briefly, my background, Robert Ruth. I'm a senior attorney with NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council. We're an international nonprofit with over 3 million members and online activists working since 1970 with our lawyers, scientists, and other environmental specialists to protect our natural resources, public health, and climate. And I serve as the Pennsylvania state lead for climate and energy. Without question, the energy transition is at an inflection point. Electricity demand is projected to grow for the first time in decades. We face seemingly intractable interconnection queue delays, and transmission planning is badly in need of updating to keep pace with a changing grid. As a result, 67 million people across the PJM footprint, which includes all of Pennsylvania, are seeing their monthly electric bills go up. Meanwhile, recent changes to federal tax law and energy policy will make it more difficult to build new electric generation in a timely manner, and it will likely make those generators that do interconnect to the grid more expensive. So there's a significant and increasing need to address our overlapping goals, supporting rapid electrification.
Shut it down. Turn off that frickin' TV.
No worries. While
That was me yelling at my kids. Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. They're over their limit. I apologize profusely. Walked through the room and the TV was on. We have a no TV in the daytime rule. Carry on, I apologize.
No worries at all, Rep. Steele. I'm familiar with your circumstances.
Four children. Yes, thank you.
No worries. So we need to support rapid electrification while reducing overall costs and ensuring grid reliability. Pennsylvania is the largest net electricity exporter in the country, so we are uniquely poised to benefit from this opportunity. And my goal here today is to try and understand and describe our existing policy landscape so that we can propose reforms that will expand clean, reliable, affordable energy solutions. My testimony briefly addressed the history of over 2 centuries of commercial coal mining in Pennsylvania. You all have a copy of my written remarks. Waste coal piles are a byproduct of coal mining operations. They're a significant subset of AML sites across Pennsylvania. We have hundreds of identified piles, as you've heard, covering thousands of acres of land. They are an unsightly blight. They pose health and safety risks while also causing environmental damage to our air, land, and water. So remediation is important. To borrow a phrase, inaction is not an option. And without solvent or known corporate owners, the burden falls on state and federal taxpayers. My testimony also briefly mentions the 1970s energy crisis, which prompted passage of FERPA, the Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act in 1978. This created financial interest in electricity production using Pennsylvania waste coal. And ever since, Pennsylvania has focused its state support for remediating these piles by further incentivizing combustion for electric generation. You've heard about waste coal's inclusion in Tier 2 of the AEPS and how Act 114 of 2020, which closed the borders for Tier 2, has been responsible for a significant increase in those Tier 2 credit prices. I included a chart from PUC's most recent annual AEPS report that provides a visual representation of how these prices have gone up. I just want to highlight a quote from that report. From our PUC, the largest source of AEPS compliance costs is being driven by increases in Tier 2. With the passage of Act 114, Tier 2 prices have risen from a historic low of roughly 25 cents to more than $30. The PUC described this as a meteoric increase in Tier 2 pricing. You also heard from Rob just now and from Chair Vitale earlier about the Coal Refuse Energy and Reclamation Tax Credit, how the per ton value of that credit has doubled recently and how the annual limit has nearly tripled. I just want to highlight that also pursuant to the state's CO2 budget trading program, otherwise known as the RGGI regulation, waste coal generators would be receiving an additional item of value in the form of cost-free allowances. Under Pennsylvania's program, waste coal facilities would be eligible for up to 12.8 million free allowances annually in a set-aside account. That would obviate the need for purchase of allowances at auction or on the secondary market. Based on recent RGGI allowance clearing prices, that would constitute over $250 million in potential savings annually. Should also note, federal regulatory compliance has been relaxed for waste coal generators this year. The federal government granted 2-year exemptions to 9 of Pennsylvania's 10 plants from EPA's MATS rule, the Mercury and Air Toxic Standards rule. The EPA has also proposed a full repeal of all greenhouse gas emission standards for fossil fuel-fired power plants. They intend to further propose to find that greenhouse gas emissions from fossil plants don't contribute significantly to dangerous air pollution. And this occurs at the same time as electric generators that clear PJM's capacity market will be receiving major windfalls with auction prices settling at record highs. You heard Rob describe that well just now. So Pennsylvania, with 10 waste coal plants still in operation, they have a combined nameplate capacity around 1.3 gigawatts and only run at about an average capacity factor of 50%. They don't contribute a meaningful share of our electric generation mix, but they do receive a meaningful share of state subsidies. And they have a fuel source that has a higher carbon intensity than burning traditional coal, and that pound for pound emits more mercury and metal-containing particulate matter. So I would like to focus my last remarks on House Bill 501, which Representative Oughton mentioned, the press legislation. It would ramp up targets from our portfolio standards through 2035 and provide eligibility for additional generation resources while creating a new Tier 3. NRDC, we conducted some modeling analysis last year and showed that overall, PRESS would protect and grow clean energy jobs, result in increased clean electricity generation and capacity, and see Pennsylvania become an even more dominant electricity exporter. So for our purposes here today, if PRESS were to become law as written, waste coal generators would shift from Tier 2 to the new Tier 3, along with other resources such as municipal solid waste, coal gasification technology, and fossil plants that use at least 20% clean hydrogen co-fired blend or equivalent carbon reduction technologies. Pennsylvania utilities would be required to retire Tier 3 credits starting at 3.8% of retail electric sales starting next year, and that target would increase in stages to 5% by 2032. Also worth noting that the alternative compliance payment, which functions as an effective cap on credit prices, would be set at $15 for Tier 3 under PRESS. For comparison, the established ACP for Tier 1 and Tier 2 under our current AEPS is $45. And you heard Rob mention what the average Tier 2 credit price was last year. So
Rob,
PRESS would mark.
you're out of time, but we're going to give you maybe another 30 seconds to deal with the television issue compensation. So keep going for a little bit.
Appreciate that. I'll be brief. So PRESS would mark a shift in the state's treatment of waste coal generators, but it would do so as part of a comprehensive plan that incentivizes 21 diverse types of energy. So Pennsylvanians are going to be facing higher energy costs as a result of recent federal policy decisions, unprecedented load growth, and hurdles caused both by PJM and at the local permitting level to timely interconnect new clean electricity to the grid. NRDC believes that there's a balance to be struck in approaching the unique challenges of remediating coal refuse piles here, and we plan to work with groups like ARIPA, our friends in organized labor, legislators and staff, and all stakeholders to try and advance solutions and strike that balance. So thank you for the extra time, thank you for the opportunity, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Rep Stender, we're going to give you the courtesy of asking the first question if you have a question. If not, you can not ask one. But if you do, you can.
I always have questions.
Fire away.
That's what makes us good legislators, right?
There you go. Fire away. Fire away.
This question would be for Rob from Penn Future. In your testimony, you mentioned the most dangerous or high-risk coal piles. Do you guys have a list of those? I've never heard of that. I mean, I live in Northumberland County. We have lots of coal piles, pretty big ones, but I've never heard. Is DEP the one who goes out and determines which ones are the most high risk or most dangerous, or is that something your organization does? But who determines that?
We heard from DEP that there are a prioritization of risk, but we also just are anecdotally are hearing, you have a coal pile that may actually be on fire, certainly high risk. Ones that are actively leaching into water, certainly a higher risk. You have other coal piles that have vegetative cover growing over them and aren't actively leaching. Objectively, that would be a lower risk coal pile. Now, we haven't gone out and inventoried what they are, but what I pointed out in my testimony is that isn't focusing on the high priority piles is not part of the subsidy program. There is no, that's never been a case. All coal piles are treated equally when objectively they're not.
Okay, thank you. Rep. Rader.
I have a quick question about the kids. No, I don't. Getting back to energy production, I don't think, and you were testifying to how much the subsidies are, but I don't think there's any energy production that doesn't have some sort of subsidies. So, I was thinking about that. But also, DEP testified to positive environmental impact of these plants, it sounded like to me. So that's a plus. But do you consider all the good-paying jobs? Because with wind and solar, you don't get long-term good union jobs with wind and solar. Do you consider the good-paying union jobs that have been established through the years with the plants like similar to this?
What I was focusing on in my testimony, Chair Rader, was simply the costs and pointing out that while the costs are increasing from these plants, the efficiency of the plants because of the low quality fuel and the fact they're beyond their useful life is decreasing. So we're going to come to a tipping point where the costs are going to continually increase, and we have to think about how we're going to address that. And certainly jobs is certainly an issue that we consider in that process. But right now we're not considering that.
Right. Yeah, that's what I thought you weren't. And also the environmental impact, because it is positive, the jobs are positive. I think we have to weigh that at the same time. Thank you.
Great. Rep. Hohenstein.
I'm passing my question to the next panel.
Rep. Geppert. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Vitale. Am I okay to go?
Rep. Geppert, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Vitale, and I appreciate, although we may have divergent views on this, I appreciate that you're going to come to Seward next week. The workers in the room, I'm sure they'll be curious to show you their operations. But anyhow, mine's for Mr. Altenberg, my question. I live in Clearfield County. I also have Cambria County, so I have a lot of these in my district. In fact, the Culver Power Plant is in my district. And when you go on the roof there, it's actually quite amazing. You'll see new green growth and old green growth. The new green growth of trees is where the mining or the reclamation sites have actually happened. Now we have brand new trees on there, and it looks real nice and all that. So additionally, the Clearfield Creek Water Association is supportive of this. The Conservation District is supportive of it. And even the groups that actually work with these are supportive. So I've heard you talk about subsidies, and I'm against subsidies. So I would just be curious if you're for the elimination of AAPS as a whole. Then we can just go back to no winners and losers, just eliminate AAPS, all the tax credits. we can do that. And additionally, since I just want one last second question here real quick, how much does your organization of your operating funds do you put into environmental cleanup of this stuff? Because it's actually a problem. And as Secretary Hout said earlier, a large portion of the funds that go to clean this up, if it isn't burnt, is paid for by a coal tax by the current coal operators. So I'm just curious on those two questions.
Could you repeat the two questions again, please?
Yes. So if you're against the subsidies of this, will you support the elimination of AEPS as a whole? And all the tax credits for all energy sources. And second, how much does your organization spend on cleaning the stuff up yourself?
Yeah, I would say we don't we're not necessarily anti-subsidy. What my testimony is really focused on is this idea that the subsidies have to be targeted at value. And again, the costs of this remediation are going up, and the efficiency of the plants are going down. At some point, there's going to be a tipping point where this is no longer a viable solution. Now, you may argue the tipping point has already been reached. You may argue the tipping point hasn't been reached yet. But the facts are we've got increasing costs and decreasing efficiencies. So in the long term, we're going to have to look at another solution. And I'm not in a position to know what my organization has done on cleanup. That's not the area I work in.
Okay, thank you. Rep. Otten?
Thank you, Chairman. And kind of as a follow-up to that question, but in a different way, I don't think that in developing press anybody was ever interested in eliminating waste coal from the conversation. I think, and sometimes it's really hard in these structures when there's so many statistics and percentages and millions and billions and megawatts and kilowatts and all that stuff, to really break through and understand what all of that means together. And what I've come to understand is that there's a significant imbalance with the subsidies going to waste coal through all of these different mechanisms, and that we need to find a balance so that the electric ratepayers are not carrying the weight of the subsidy, which is what's currently happening. And so I just wonder, as we talk about it, Robert, you got to it a little bit, but how do we find the balance? I think one of the things we've talked about in amendments to the bill is to keep waste coal in a tier 3, because that kind of takes them out of the second tier that's being dominated and the cost is being driven through the roof, but giving enough of an ACP so that it doesn't eliminate waste coal from the scenario. And I don't think anybody is advocating for that. And so I just want to make sure that that's real clear, but also would love to get your feedback on how do we find that balance? How do we equalize it so that ratepayers who are paying electric bills are not carrying the weight of these subsidies in the way that they are currently?
Oh, does Robert want to take it, or?
Yeah, yeah, I'm happy to start. That's a great question, Rep. Otten. NRDC supports HB 501 as written. We also would have interest in trying to discuss amendments that would garner additional broader support for the legislation to have it be have it move forward through the House. I could see there being. I don't come here today with prescriptive recommendations on certain changes that we'd like to see made. There are options to discuss about the setting of the ACP, the alternative compliance level for Tier 3. You could change the trajectory at which that Tier 3 ramps up between now and 2032. There could be a discussion about limiting additional resources from Tier 3. I think trying to strike the right balance is in part reflective of our priorities, which is to try and take action to address climate change, but also protect and grow clean energy jobs and make sure that consumers are not burdened with unfairly high prices and not receiving commensurate value for those payments. So those are some of the areas that I could see being discussed in terms of potential reforms or amendments to HB 501. We support the bill as it currently exists, but always happy to discuss possible changes, because again, I'm here to just try and articulate what the current policy landscape is, not so much express NRDC's strong commitment to or opinion on how Pennsylvania should further subsidize waste coal.
Thank you. Rep. Pugh?
Hi, yes, thank you. I have one question, but I'm to answer some questions of my legislators up here. I am in Sawyersville, is inside of my district, and we just did a mine reclamation of 7 acres inside of the district that has now been donated back to the borough of Sawyersville in order to be a community park to be used. It's a beautiful 7-acre green field with several tons of column to be cleared yet and to be put back into good use, whether it's for building or community use or parks into the community. So we've turned it around. We've cleaned the water on those 7 acres. We've gotten rid of the blow off from the columns into people's homes and turned it into a beautiful, useful piece of property while generating energy of the stuff that was hauled away, as well as creating jobs, you know, for the hauling, for the plant work, and for the actual removal of the stuff on the site. So my question is, when it comes to the capping, is it proven that acid mine drainage isn't going to happen just by covering these with clay? And how about, you know, the fires? Is it guaranteed that they won't catch on fire and we're not going to have issues with that? Because it would seem to me, you know, I'm coming off of a horse world, hay combusts when it's wet and gets put in an enclosed area. Will that happen with this?
Yeah, I think like anything, this is something that the remediation of a pile is going to have to be determined on a case-by-case basis, representative of what the best plan is for that pile. You know, we have had piles, and I think some of the later panelists are going to be better able to speak to this. We have had piles that are already effectively stabilized. They're covered with vegetation. You wouldn't necessarily know that there's a coal pile there. We don't see the leaching and things like that coming from the piles. You know, if capping isn't the best solution for a pile, we do have alternatives, as you heard from DEP's testimony, where you can remove and send it to an appropriate disposal facility that can dispose of that material. That's an alternative too. Now, again, they say that maybe cost of removal is high right now, but again, this is a situation where the cost of combustion, not counting the public health and environmental costs, the cost of combustion is increasing and the efficiency at the plants is decreasing. This is not a sustainable solution that is going to eliminate our waste coal piles. At some point, the costs are going to get too high. And it's really, I think, up to the legislature to decide when that point is reached.
Okay, thank you. Rep. Brown?
Yes, thank you for your testimony. So I'm still trying to learn this whole industry, right? So my questions are for me to fully understand what's going on. But it seems to me, from some folks who represent some of these coal mining areas, they think it works. And so we're looking to dismantle a system that potentially works for the workers, ratepayers, and for the environment. I said it's not? Okay. So, but you're in favor of a system that potentially might work or might not work. So it's like we're just going to just test this out. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I was not speaking about dismantling a system at all. Certainly, as Representative Otten had mentioned, with the current proposal to change AEPS, it still retains subsidies for waste coal. Again, my point is that there have been certainly remediations in the past. And yes, the communities are happy with the remediations that have happened in the past, but the costs of doing that are exploding, and they are going to continue to explode. So what is the sustainable pathway that we can look at to remediate this problem in the long term? And the current program isn't going to get us there.
Does Tier 1 currently cost more than Tier 2?
No, Tier 2 costs more than Tier 1. A lot more.
And I would just say it's a fair question, Representative. Also not speaking here in favor of dismantling any particular system, but again, trying to strike a balance because of the inflection point where we find ourselves, where we should determine how Pennsylvania taxpayers and ratepayers currently subsidize waste coal generation, and whether there need to be any reforms made to it. Again, we support press. I could think of other potential changes to the coal refuse and reclamation tax credit. That tax credit is currently valued at $8 per ton of waste coal burned, with some other conditions attached to it. That credit rate could become variable and tied to the price of electricity. So there are just ways to examine how Pennsylvania is currently using taxpayer funds to support an industry that, again, can't be left alone. Inaction is not an option here, but interested in trying to come to different solutions given the period we find ourselves in with electricity prices skyrocketing.
Okay. Unfortunately, we are out of time in this segment. I note that Rep. Twardzik has an unanswered question. He will be given first priority next segment. Thank you. I'm sorry? Okay, we will put Mahaffey on the list too. Okay, we'll get that list all squared away. Thank you. Thank both of you. And next, we have a former House member, Jared Gibbons. Welcome home, Jared. Jared is the executive director of ARIPA, otherwise known as the Appalachian Region Independent Power Producers Association. Jared, oh, there you go. Okay.
All right, I've got a PowerPoint, and we're going to move fairly quickly to try to get through all this. So thank you, Mr. Chair. You go to the next slide. ARIPA is the trade association for 10 unique environmental facilities located in Pennsylvania that remediate polluting coal refuse piles, produce alternative energy sold through the PJM energy market to provide private funding to support mine reclamation. Contrary to some testimony, they are not high-emitting plants. In fact, most are among the plants used to develop the maximum achievable mercury floor for coal plants. Next slide. The coal refuse energy industry is a decades-long public-private partnership with the Commonwealth, providing a cost-effective, environmentally beneficial solution for cleaning up Pennsylvania's historic coal mining waste problem, the largest in the nation, while producing reliable electricity. The state encouraged the creation of the industry in the 1980s with PUC-mandated power purchase agreements and tax-exempt PEDFA loans to construct the facilities. Later, waste coal energy was included in Tier 2 of the APS program, the Coal Refuse Energy and Reclamation Tax Credit, and the Coal Refuse Set-Aside in Pennsylvania's RGGI program. Next slide. The industry is also supported by dozens of local watershed groups, county conservation districts, and statewide environmental organizations, some of whom provide a written testimony to the committee. I'd encourage you to read their testimony, as these are the environmental groups on the ground every day partnering with us to clean up these polluting waste coal piles. Next slide. While at least 211 million tons of polluting coal refuse remain, our estimates show the industry has already reclaimed roughly 257 million tons. How would you like to live with these dangerous waste coal mountains in your backyard? Next slide. Under federal law, landowners and companies responsible for legacy coal refuse piles prior to 1977 are no longer liable for remediating abandoned coal refuse piles, leaving the cost of this environmental problem to the state. Even with the state expected to receive more than $3 billion over the next 15 years, this amount will be insufficient to fund all currently identified AML problems. As coal refuse piles are typically lower priority for AML funding, they are the least likely to be reclaimed, even though they have some of the worst environmental harms. Next slide. Abandoned mine runoff is the second largest source of water pollution in the state, affecting aquatic life and potable water supply. The location of these impaired waterways corresponds closely with the location of the coal refuse piles across the state. Next slide. There are several ways to value the impact of the coal refuse energy industry. One is to quantify the environmental and social benefits of improvements in air quality, water quality, public health and safety, and land value. These are valued at $62 million annually, totaling $1.2 billion over a 20-year period. Next slide. Projects bids from recent years can provide a basis to estimate the avoided cost it would take for the Commonwealth to do the work currently performed by the industry. Some have pointed to the Ehrenfeld project as a reasonable comparison, but that project had special circumstances that are unlikely to be repeated. For one, 90% or more of this pile was burned out refuse, also known as red dog. not typical coal refuse with pyrites that will leach acid mine runoff and fuel combustion. Generally, capping in place and revegetation may improve aesthetics, but it's not going to completely eliminate the air and water quality impacts to the environment like the coal refuse energy industry does. Next slide. Looking at the average of other bids received provides a more accurate representation of the actual cost the Commonwealth would incur for typical removal, disposal, and remediation efforts. Thus, for the state to reclaim the 6.6 million tons the industry did in 2023 would have cost at least $290 million. Next slide. The industry generates annual economic benefits of $697 million. It supports 2,200 family-sustaining jobs in rural communities, with just over half of those direct positions with average salaries above $81,000 and total employee earnings of $155 million, including some highly skilled union workers who also provided written comment to the committee, some of whom are here today to support the industry. Next slide. CFB ash does not have the same environmental risks as traditional coal power plant ash. The ash from coal refuse plants is tested and approved by DEP for beneficial use as a soil amendment or fill material to remediate AML sites due to its highly alkaline and pozzolanic or cement-like characteristics, which cause it to harden and encapsulate refuse material, as well as any heavy metals or other pollutants that may be present in the ash. When utilized in the mine land reclamation process, as shown by a DEP study of the Blacklick Creek. Once called Sulphur Creek by the locals, it's now a popular fishing spot. Next slide. Coal refuse piles also have negative consequences for air quality for surrounding communities. For example, coal dust from piles can be swept up by the wind and deposited elsewhere, creating adverse effects for downwind residents. Polluting air emissions from coal refuse piles are often the result of weathering and spontaneous combustion, which can eventually result in open burning. Next slide. According to a study by TRC Environmental, the coal refuse energy industry eliminates 3.9 net tons of CO2 equivalent for every ton of coal refuse that it consumes. Similarly, a study by Lehigh University found each ton of coal refuse reclaimed by the industry produces a net reduction of between 1.16 and 5.17 tons of CO2e, or a total greenhouse gas reduction of 130 to 580 million tons over 20 years. While the combustion of coal refuse does emit the greenhouse gas carbon dioxide, doing so avoids ongoing emissions of various greenhouse gases, including the more potent methane that would otherwise have been emitted from the same amount of abandoned coal refuse if left in the piles. Very simply, when the full emissions profile of the coal refuse energy industry is considered, including the reduction of emissions from coal refuse piles, the coal refuse energy industry produces a net reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. The industry faces many challenges, including PJM market volatility and rising remediation costs, such as having to travel farther as nearby waste coal piles are cleaned up, a victim of its own success. Next slide. Cost of production for coal refuse energy plants grew from $39 per megawatt hour in 2019 to a break even of $62 a megawatt hour in 2023 and continue to rise at an alarming rate, while wholesale energy prices continue to provide insufficient revenue to support the industry, making programs like the APS vital to continued operations. As proposed, next slide. As proposed, press would massively cut support for the industry. While we respect the desire to update the APS, particularly Tier 1 that sends 70% of its funding out of state, Tier 2 is currently working to support the investment in jobs, and the only energy source that provides tangible, quantifier environmental benefits to the Commonwealth in terms of air, land, and water reclamation. Since 2021, the APS Tier 2 prices have increased, but they've increased the same amount as the Tier 1, tracking an increase across PJM-wide. Prior to the border closure, Tier 2 was actually dominated by Virginia pumped hydro facilities. And PA coal refuse now makes up about 56% of the Tier 2 credits. I'll note, just responding to a question Rep. Otten asked, how long will it take to do this work? It really depends on how much these plants can run, the quality of the material, the distance to the piles. But each day the plant runs is one day closer to accomplishing their environmental mission. And next slide. Picture's worth 1,000 words. These are a couple of the sites. The Steinman site out in Cambria County, Barnes-Watkins out in Cambria County. Next slide, a couple more. Spangler, and also in Cambria County, and Soberdash in Westmoreland County. You can see in these piles some of the work that's been done. We look forward to hopefully continuing that work. We look forward to continuing to work with all of you to try to make sure that this program is doing its job and that this industry can continue doing its job. So with that, open to questions.
Thanks, Jared. I have a question. In reading your testimony, that was the first time I heard introduced the concept of methane reduction from waste coal piles. I just wanted to double check. Is that a Lehigh University study finding, or if not, like where does that number come from and how was it calculated?
So TRC and Lehigh University, both did studies on this back in around 2022, 2023. How was it It was calculated by looking at emissions from pile sources. It's a calculated number. They didn't go out and do actual measurements. I mean, the way the piles are set up and spread out so much, but it's well known that coal piles in general, including coal refuse piles, do emit emissions from their breaking down. I want you to think of it much along the same lines of, say, biomass, or think of it along the lines of, say, landfill gas.
But if I looked at that Lehigh study, could I?
It shows the studies they use to calculate, and why the broad range of numbers. They actually, Lehigh particularly looked at various emission factors, so they did kind of a low end, high end, depending on exactly how much it would. But regardless, at a minimum, when you think of this industry, you should be probably thought of much along the lines of, again, like a biomass, where the emissions are offset, and really what you're looking at is a greenhouse gas neutral at a minimum.
Okay, we'll take a look at that. Rep. Twardzik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gibbons, pleasure to hear from you and the good things you talk about. When I was young, we played softball, and there was a coal bank right behind the field, and at the end of a game, you'd have a race to the top of the hill. And I used to make it and do pretty well at it, not so much today. That hill is gone because of the cogeneration. We're talking about reliable energy, too, and when we talked about this press, it just doesn't help us get reliable energy. Solar, wind, it doesn't give us the base load we need, and part of that is going to be filled by our cogeneration plants. And there's other failures, like Solyndra cost $570 million, Abound Solar, $401 million, Cali Solar, $280 million. So these pie-in-the-sky alternative energy things have not worked. They're not ready for prime time. Your process has worked, although if we would force you in press to spend more money on taxes, which would be then going off to alternative energy, would that help you keep your plants open, or would it be better to allow you to keep your money and reinvest in those plants?
Well, as it relates to the impact from press, I mean, certainly, and I think, it's been acknowledged that it is definitely a cut as proposed to the industry, one that probably would not allow the industry to remain open. The reality is that, again, this has been a public-private partnership from the get-go. The state has always supported this industry from the power purchase agreements Governor Casey pushed through the PUC back in the 80s and 90s, through what we're doing today. The reality is that these plants weren't built to compete. They have costs that other plants don't have. These reclamation costs, you don't have gas power plants doing that. You don't have other coal plants doing that. We have costs that just aren't modeled into the PJM system, and that's where we need the state to step in and help us to make sure that those costs are covered, and so we can provide that reliable energy. We do store material on site. These sources are reliable. Maybe they're running less, but mostly that's because of the economics and the difficulty at PJM. We'd like to run them more, but we need PJM's market system to work for us. But in lieu of that, we need the state's help if we're going to continue to do that reclamation that you're talking about.
Thanks. Rep. Day.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I appreciate the group of people you have amassed today and in particular, Jared Gibbons is a former member. His executive summary answered my questions. The first 3 bullet points are exactly what I put 3 questions, tried to put them all into one, and he very articulately answered them right in the executive summary on the first page, the first 3 bulleted items. So it basically had to do with what is the issue in Pennsylvania, how do we measure it by acres, BTUs, piles. It's hard to do, but you also in the second bullet talked about how many this process has achieved as far as mitigating the problem that's in Pennsylvania. So that was my question. I have 10 other questions, but since my primary, most important question was answered, I'll turn back my time to the chairman and the rest of our colleagues. Just remind everybody, when you hire a former, hardworking legislator like my colleagues here, and this colleague was on the other side of the aisle, he comes prepared, and that was a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Representative.
Thank you, Rep. Mahaffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gibbons, my first question is, how many megawatts do all 10 maximum, when running full capacity, do these plants produce?
Net 1,197, and that's net megawatts.
1,000, what was it again?
197, just under 1,200.
Okay, 12, let's just say 1,200. Great. Okay, now AEPS, and I've said this before, is extremely difficult to understand, and I think what happened is the General Assembly missed the mark when they closed the borders in Tier 2. And why I say that is when we tried to do this in 2019 to save the nuke industry, we looked at a floor and a ceiling. Now, Tier 3, if it was implemented for the nuclear industry, that would have been, that we wouldn't be getting any money from the nuclear industry, wouldn't be getting any money from Tier 3 at this point in time. Now, here's the question, and they said it's a bailout and all the other things. I do believe waste coal does a great job. I do believe it is a base load power. I do believe, and I could see it, Westwood, Nate, I live up there too, used to, and around Roush Creek. It used to be the Rocky Mountains, now it's Kansas. Okay, it did its job and everything it is doing. So we can't pull the carpet from underneath waste coal and think it's going badly. But here's the point I'm getting at. In 2028, you're looking at about $1.2 billion. Am I correct? Close to that number? As far as AEPS, if we continue to work and where the ceiling would be on this, or maybe it's closer to 2030, the number's like $1.2 billion.
For the full program, you're talking?
Yes.
Honestly, I mostly focus on Tier 2, so I don't know the full program cost.
Okay, but majority of it goes to you guys, and I understand that. But we have to readjust that ceiling. It has to be adjusted because the ratepayers are paying for this. And you guys are doing 1,200 megawatts.
Yeah.
I was fighting for 12,000 megawatts, okay?
Yeah.
And that was a $500 million ceiling. So I think there's some adjustments that can be made in this. Nowhere should we ever think about getting rid of it, and we should capitalize on it. Maybe production of new plants, production of whatever it takes to move forward on this. Because in your testimony in May when we were here, okay, you had testimony on House Bill 501. You said to break even is $62 to $64. That's changed, right? Everything's changed. $55 now a megawatt is where the capacity market is. You have some great incentives, tax incentives, and others. So even before you get into the AEPS Tier 2, you're actually getting into, you're getting to a place where you're beyond breaking even. So I'm just asking, I guess, for my thought process and moving forth and working with Rep. Otten on this and trying to come to a conclusion where we help out those that are cleaning up the environment. Are you guys willing to look at this in a serious manner to see what is fair and what isn't fair to the ratepayers?
Absolutely. I mean, when the border was closed, we did some study. We actually worked with a consultant, Thorndike Landing, and did a study to see where pricing would go. The original expectation was about $16 is where Tier 2 pricing would go. Now, at the time, Tier 1 pricing was down around $10, $12. We kind of thought 16 was the max. The reality is the pricing for all of these credits has gone up. This is a competitive marketplace, and waste coal is not the only thing in Tier 2. Municipal waste is in Tier 2. It's also eligible in New Jersey, where their Tier 2 pricing is over $30. hydro, Run a River Hydro is also in there. It's eligible for Virginia's program, which is also over $30. So we're the part of this pricing is following that, in addition to following where our costs are to need these facilities to run. So yes, I do think that you're right. We need to balance this. We need to make sure that the numbers are right, and I think we're willing to work with that. I guess our point is the numbers that are in there right now aren't right. In the press bill, we need, but I think we can work together to get a program that's right. I think there's also other considerations to be taken, particularly transition. How would you transition from a 2-tier to a 3-tier program? What's going to happen to the credits when you do that? Are they going to lose their value? Because right now we're running on credit. We're running based on economic models of where the credit pricing is currently. Again, it really just depends on where that goes. But in the end, again, I do think that we absolutely are willing to work to make sure we have a program that supports the industry and supports the ratepayers.
I think that's, at the end of the day, that's where we're at, right? We have high electric costs. The demand is through the roof. If AI continually comes here and wants to, buy our baseload power, I mean, really, that's what they're looking at, because they want to make sure that power switch never goes off for them. I understand it, and I fully get where you're at, but there is some ceiling adjustment that needs to be done in Tier 2. And that's not just you, and as far as waste coal, it's everybody that's in Tier 2 right now has to be reevaluated and see where we need to go for the ratepayers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We are unfortunately beyond time in this segment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jared. I appreciate that. I note that Rep. Hohenstein, Brown, and Rader did not have their questions answered, so they will be given first priority in our next and final segment. So next we will call up Tom Schuster and Charles McFedrin. Tom Schuster is the Director, Clean Air Program, Sierra Club, and Charlie is the Senior Attorney for Earth Justice. And you guys can, thank you for coming, and please begin when ready.
Thank you, Chair Vitale. Oh, there we go. Good morning, Chair Vitale, Chair Rader, and members of the House Environmental and Natural Resource Protection Committee, and thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. I'm Tom Schuster. I'm the director of the Sierra Club Pennsylvania chapter. I'm speaking today on behalf of our nearly 25,000 members across the Commonwealth. I'm also from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. I recognize some of the sites and projects that have been shown by the presenters. We recognize the harm that abandoned coal refuse piles pose to our water quality and to our aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems, and we support their responsible remediation. However, we do find that the negative environmental impacts of burning coal refuse often outweigh the positives, and that waste coal power generators are already oversubsidized at the expense of other remediation alternatives that better serve Pennsylvanians. We've heard already about the expanded tax credit, the rising cost of APS Tier 2, and by our calculations, the total cost of these two programs together was over $30 per ton of coal refuse reclaimed, and the total cost was about $255 million. And this is comparable to, and in some cases, actually more than projects that utilized other reclamation methods. Coal refuse burning is not without environmental impact. In terms of air quality, compared to conventional coal, which is already our dirtiest electricity source, waste coal produces approximately 50% more climate-disrupting carbon dioxide pollution, higher levels of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are suspected to cause cancer and birth defects, an order of magnitude more acid gases such as hydrogen fluoride, hydrogen chloride, and hydrogen cyanide, and that resulted in a special carve-out in the mercury and air toxic standard to allow these types of plants to comply, and also are subject to higher allowed levels of nitrogen oxides which are the primary precursor to smog, and we still have numerous counties in Pennsylvania that are in non-attainment for that. Also, the Seward waste coal plant is primarily responsible for portions of Cambria and Westmoreland counties being currently out of compliance with federal sulfur dioxide air quality standards. And in some cases, the actual remediation of these sites is being conducted without effective controls to reduce fugitive dust and pollution from stormwater runoff. And in my written testimony, I include some photographs that were submitted by members in the Mockinoy Creek watershed. This is a project that's been underway for many years. The fuel is feeding to waste coal power plants at Gilberton and Schuylkill Energy Resources. And we've received a lot of complaints documenting the orange dust blowing off of coal piles, which appear to be often untreated, coating properties in the area. And after rain events, nearly every rain event, in fact, we either see thick gray to black runoff in Mockinoy Creek or cloudy orange, and it changes because the runoff patterns change as they move the material around, extract coal refuse, and deposit new coal refuse. This was already an impaired stream, but in our view, this activity is making matters worse. If it were a short-term project, that would be one thing. This has been going on for decades and is nowhere near complete. We also have some concerns about the leaching of toxins post-reclamation. Under their beneficial use permit, these projects are allowed to deposit coal ash on-site without a liner, and while they do reduce the visible acid mine drainage in many cases, there is still leachate that occurs, and this is required to be monitored but has not been analyzed in really any systematic way. We found one analysis that raised some questions in our mind. We went back and pulled more data, including more years, following DEP analysis, and we found that, for one, there are several monitoring sites that are recording more arsenic, lead, and selenium than pre-reclamation. There's many instances where arsenic, lead, and selenium exceeded federal or state established water quality standards. And for 11 of the 15 monitoring wells in this Blacklick Creek site, the test limits, the minimum detection limit was higher than the relevant water quality standard. There are alternatives to this. How am I in time? Am I running?
You're at about 5:20, so
Okay.
so you.
All right.
you-
So there has, for many years, the waste coal power industry has argued that they're providing necessary service for reclaiming land that the public can't afford to. We do have more money under the IIJA now. Recognize that there are more problems that money has to deal with than just coal refuse piles, but there is more money to deal with that now. And the amount of money, as has been stated previously, the amount of money that the industry is receiving has been going up significantly. There are alternatives out there that are able to accomplish similar tasks on a lower per ton and per acre rate. I cite a few examples in here. The Ehrenfeld project reclaimed 70 acres, removed 3.2 million tons of refuse, which was not suitable, as was stated, for energy generation. The cost of that was about $35.3 million. Capping in place, which involves neutralization, regrading, covering with soil, and revegetating. An example, award-winning example being the Mather project in Greene County, cost about $9.5 million, reclaiming 70 acres and covering 6.4 million tons of material. Now, if you break these down, given the current annual subsidy of $255 million for waste coal combustion, that equates to about $1.1 million per acre, according to a RIPA report on their annual performance, or about $32 per ton remediated, compared with the Ehrenfeld cost, which is $504,285 per acre and $11 a ton, or the Mather cost of $135,714 per acre or $1.50 per ton. waste coal power is actually significantly more expensive than these two examples. And so put another way, we have an opportunity to potentially redirect some of this $255 million in subsidies to other types of remediation programs that may be able to accomplish more. In fact, Mather, at similar costs, we could have reclaimed nearly 8 times the land area that ERIPA says it remediates on an annual basis. So what we need to do is target subsidies toward this. We need to solve the problem, but we need to target subsidies. And in order for these subsidies to be significantly targeted, they can't simply be a...
Tom, you're at time now, so
time.
just kind of wrap up that
Okay,
thought.
I will just wrap up. We have to phase out the subsidies paid by electric ratepayers under the AEPS and pay for environmental performance according to certain metrics. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Tom. Charlie?
Good morning, Chair Vitale, Chair Rader, and members of the committee. My name is Charlie McFedrin. I'm an attorney with Earth Justice located in Philadelphia. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today regarding the remediation of waste coal piles. Earth Justice urges the legislature to take action to stop subsidizing the practice of burning waste coal. Earth Justice is a public interest environmental law firm that protects people's health, advances clean energy, and fights climate change. We represent national groups, including Sierra Club and Natural Resources Defense Council, and statewide groups like Penn Future. On waste coal, we have represented the Scrubgrass Creek Watershed Association in Venango County and have worked with Save Carbon County, among others. Our site-specific work in Pennsylvania has included 2 waste coal plants, Scrubgrass and Panther Creek, that benefit from subsidies. These plants burn waste coal, then store or dump the post-combustion ash. Both plants use energy they generate to mine cryptocurrency, that is, to run specialized computers that seek financial payments for crypto-related activities. Energy used for on-site cryptocurrency mining at these plants is energy that is not provided to power homes and businesses via the electric grid. When they burn waste coal, these plants pump carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, as demonstrated by EPA data. In 2022, Scrubgrass emitted over 600,000 tons of carbon dioxide. This is the equivalent of 126,000 gas-powered cars driven for 1 year. In 2023, Panther Creek reported emissions of over 760,000 tons of carbon dioxide, which equals the pollution from over 160,000 cars. To look at it the opposite way, you would need to take 286,000 cars off the road to offset the combined Scrubgrass and Panther Creek carbon dioxide emissions. In addition to carbon dioxide, these plants emit a variety of other dangerous air pollutants. They emit nitrogen oxides, which contribute to smog. Several smokestack pollutants at these plants contribute to the formation of downwind fine particles, which are linked with health effects, from emergency room visits to premature deaths. Regarding carbon dioxide, climate change threatens our planet and the people who live on it. We are already seeing its effects. Last year had the highest global temperatures in recorded history. Warmer temperatures mean that the atmosphere holds more moisture, intensifying the effects of hurricanes as to rainfall, wind, and flooding. Hotter temperatures also contribute to the Canadian wildfires that affect our air quality here in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has produced a series of climate action plans describing the challenges we face and our opportunities to respond. The 2024 Climate Action Plan update describes risks from climate change to the Commonwealth and its citizens. These risks include increases in precipitation that will cause impacts to infrastructure, human health, and agriculture. More frequent heat waves will create health and economic impacts for vulnerable populations, including, among others, the elderly, outdoor workers, and those with cardiovascular conditions. The 2024 update also details other risks to the Commonwealth from climate, including landslides, sea level rise along the Delaware estuary, and severe weather events. In response to these threats, the 2024 update includes a wide range of opportunities across our economy to reduce greenhouse gases. In the transportation sector, these include transit improvements and reduced vehicle emissions. For industry, the 2024 update describes opportunities with efficiency and fuels. The update also describes additional opportunities in power generation, agriculture, and land and forest management, among others. Given the urgency of the climate threat and these efforts to respond, many Pennsylvanians would be astounded to know that our state government pays their tax dollars to waste coal plants to create climate-killing pollution. This is antithetical to the goals of our climate plan and what Pennsylvania actually needs, but the Pennsylvania taxpayer subsidizes this combustion. For example, the Commonwealth provides a coal refuse energy and reclamation tax credit. Following legislation last year, this subsidy now provides a tax credit of $8 per ton for burning waste coal used for energy generation. This credit encourages the combustion of waste coal and the resulting air pollution. The 2024 legislation also increased the total statewide limit for this windfall from $20 million to $50 million a year, subsidizing greenhouse gas pollution. Additionally, waste coal is considered a Tier 2 resource under the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard. Again, many Pennsylvanians would be surprised to learn that waste coal combustion receives favorable treatment and an effective subsidy of up to $200 million, as described in the testimony of other witnesses here today, under a law intended to encourage forms of low-carbon energy production like wind and solar power. Disposal of waste coal through burning is not remediation. It creates harmful air pollution and contributes to climate change. We urge the legislature to take action to stop subsidizing this harmful practice. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Rep. Hohenstein?
Thank you, Chair. I actually wanted to ask this question of Rep. Gibbons, and I want to express my thanks for your taking this issue on directly and not shying away from it. But I do think it is a question that you both could potentially look at as well. And Governor Rendell once used a phrase that a lot of folks here know: pigs get fed and hogs get slaughtered. I look at the last 5 years of how this tax credit program has rolled out, and I want to protect good union jobs. I'm looking at all of you guys here and appreciate, one, the hard work you do, two, that it is something that we do need. We do need to find a way to appropriately deal with waste coal, and that you deserve to be paid. But I'm also looking at you, none of you look like you're rookies. It looks like you were probably out there at least 5 or 6 years ago, which means your jobs were there. And we have looked at the last 5 years, your bosses have been making insane profits. And, you know, when I think back to, you know, my history lessons about the Gilded Age, Andrew Carnegie made an obscene amount of extra money and then turned it back into creating universities and creating other ways to generate economic opportunities and do a lot of different things. He didn't stick with just one thing. And I'm a little worried that when we give all of this money, and now the money has gone from being like this to being like this, to the people running these companies, that they're just going to get stuck in their own game and not be innovative, not be creative with the kinds of solutions that we need. And frankly, this is really where it really comes to bear for me, and it's something that Rep. Otten mentioned as well, the ratepayers. We don't want to see these additional costs that are coming through in the electric generation field that are getting subsidized with our taxpayer money, then being sort of a double whammy on our taxpayers by getting people who are paying the electricity rates having to pay a second time. But we got to protect jobs. I will note this as a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison. we've been pushing here for transit funding, somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 million. SEPTA in Philadelphia supports 9,500 good union-paying jobs in Philly and in the region. What's the cost of preserving our jobs? And this is something I think was alluded to by Rep. Mahaffey, that I'd like to see what the actual answer is in terms of like where the numbers are that we're looking at. And that is, again, recognizing we're not going to do away with these subsidies. What's the appropriate level of reimbursement here? Because it's gone from $1.7 million to...
Joe, just,
all right,
what we're trying to do is we have to fashion what we say into some semblance of a question to the panel.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay. Yeah, try to get to that pretty quickly.
Right. Okay. All right. So the subsidies have gone from 31 cents in 2019 to over 26 or almost $30 in 2024. Is that the right place to start drawing a line? Where is that line best drawn? And how do we make sure that we're using taxpayer money efficiently when we're dealing both with energy costs and with environmental remediation?
I can try to speak to that from the standpoint of cost-effective environmental remediation, at least. And I think that what we have right now is a system that is not actually targeted, is not creating the incentives to address the highest priority problems. The APS Tier 2 credit, the waste coal credit per ton doesn't prioritize in any way. And so what happens is the operators are incentivized to go after the fuel that is highest energy content, lowest cost of extraction, transportation. I think what we really need to be doing is, for any subsidies that we are putting forward to try to address this problem, create a set of environmental deliverables that can be met through a variety of reclamation means. It could include some waste coal. Shouldn't really be tied to ratepayer dollars. It should be tied toward. It should be tied more toward the environmental remediation costs, and consider all alternatives.
Okay, thank you, Rep. Brown.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for your testimony. I just have some clarifying questions. So, you represent one of the sides in this industry that have closed several of the plants, correct?
I have, with Sierra Club, we have worked to enforce environmental standards that some aging coal plants have not been able to meet and have retired.
So those plants are now closed?
Correct.
So now what is the condition of, like, are the piles still there?
What we have not focused on waste coal plants. We have focused on conventional coal plants, and so we're talking about coal that is being currently mined, and hopefully the waste from that is being disposed of according to current state and federal law.
You said hopefully is being disposed of.
Well,
so it could still be there.
Yeah, and that brings up another point, which is that the AEPS doesn't define coal refuse as refuse that has been, strictly speaking, abandoned. It can also give a subsidy for burning later coal refuse that was disposed of in a DEP facility. And so something that is being generated in real time could at some point be eligible for being burned in this process.
Okay, so basically the jobs are gone for all the people in those communities, correct?
I can help speak to that. Some of these coal plants have been reinvented as gas plants. The Homer City is a prime example in Indiana County. It's coming back as a 4 gigawatt gas plant, the largest in the nation. And there are jobs there in terms of construction and then someday in terms of operating that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Rep. Pugh?
Yes, thank you. I think what is going on here is very, very important. But I also, I know I mentioned before on how great this mine reclamation is actually taking place. And I am not one to kick the can down the road. So I have a lot of concern when it comes to capping the coal and leaving the toxins on the grounds that can seep into our waters because, look, it rains and even clay washes away. So we're not removing the problem, we're just covering it for our future, for our children and our grandchildren to have to face it. So I think taking it head on is the most cost-effective way for us, for the state, and for our residents in order to take this on. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. Aren't we just kicking the can down the road by not taking this head on and cleaning the air, cleaning the water, cleaning everything around because the water runs downstream? So it's not just taking place in the areas in which these columns are, it's taking place all the way down. And I'm learning a lot more about columns and coal than I have ever known in my life, but Mr. Bobby Hughes and Mr. Hank Zielinski in my district have tried to make sure they educate me as well as they can on this.
I appreciate the question, and I think that a lot of this has to honestly be solved on a case-by-case basis. There are some waste coal piles that are too dirty to burn. There was a permit for the Northampton Generating Station in 2015. I put this in my written testimony, didn't get to it here, but there were several piles that they identified that they wanted to burn. They would have blown through their limits for allowable air emissions of lead. They requested and they received a 20-fold increase in that allowable limit for lead air pollution. Those are piles that should not have been burned. They should have been dealt with in another way. There are going to be piles that are not necessarily acceptable to cap in place. We have a toolbox full of tools here. We can remediate in the most environmentally responsible way. In some cases, the material has been there for so long, it has leached for so long, it is not leaching much anymore. And in those cases, it may well make the most sense to cap and revegetate. And there may be some some refuse that is more prone to catching fire. And in those cases, I think it may make sense to haul it away and generate electricity with it. But that has to be a targeted decision. There was a project that Mr. Jarrett showed a picture of the Steinman project on the Path of the Flood Trail in Cambria County. It's a trail that I'm very familiar with. I take my relatives there. I bike and hike it a lot. That was a hybrid project where some of the material was burned at a waste coal facility. Some of it was capped in place, and it made the Path of Flood Trail much more user-friendly and eliminated pollution. But the company in that case got an additional grant to excavate, haul away, and burn that waste coal that was separate from any of the subsidy programs we have here. That's actually the type of targeted solution that I think makes more sense.
Okay. Any further questions? We good? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony today. That actually concludes the testimony. As Rep. Gephardt mentioned, we are going to be visiting the Seward waste coal plant on the 19th of August at 12 noon. Teresa McCurdy is going to be our host, and we're going to speak to the people who work there and the people who run the place, and we're going to not only tour the plant, but we're going to see some waste coal piles, I think perhaps a before and after picture. So I encourage the committee to participate in this tour. Chair Rader, did you have any final thoughts?
I do, for a change. I just want to summarize quickly Today, my impression of today, I think none of us want to kill the industry. That's the impression I get, or most of us do not want to. So I think we have to be careful. I think we see a positive impact on the environment in different ways. I think we see a positive impact with the job creation. So there are a lot of things that we do not want to see go away. So whenever we do any kind of adjustment on whatever we're going to do in committee or on the floor, I think we have to keep that in mind. I think there are a lot of things that have come out today that people still want to support. Thank you.
Okay.
you.